Hello, my name is Briar. Welcome to my channel where I talk about my journey from passionate writer of fantasy novels to one day a published and still passionate writer of fantasy novels. Today I want to talk about writing unreliable narrators because I didn't realize when I started writing my young adult werewolf novel, which I am currently rewriting into an adult werewolf novel, I didn't realize that my narrator was unreliable until it was pointed out to me by one of my readers. So I want to dive into a bit of what it means to write an unreliable narrator, some tips and tricks that I've learned to make that more apparent in my writing and also help you recognize unreliable narrators in your reading. And just, I've learned a lot about the subject, so I wanted to share with y'all. The first thing to note is not all unreliable narrators are the same. So when I say unreliable narrator, what does that mean? Typically, an unreliable narrator is the first person narrator of your story, and they are not telling the truth in their recount of whatever's happening. So this could be for multiple reasons. Either they're deliberately trying to misdirect the reader, they're trying to be deliberately deceptive. They don't want you to know the truth of what happened. They want you to know their version of what happened. Or they're being unintentionally deceptive, where they are not representing the full truth because they are shying away from something, or they're misrepresenting something because they don't know any better. So if your narrator is being intentionally deceptive, there's a couple of ways that you might want to approach that. And if your narrator is unintentionally deceptive, there's a couple of different ways that you would represent that and help the reader to understand maybe they shouldn't be taking everything this narrator says at face value because things are not as they seem. In general, when you're looking at writing an unreliable narrator, you're going to be looking at two specific areas. That is the fine details and the characters' characterization of themselves and other characters within the world. So their interactions with others and themselves. When you're writing a deceptive narrator, someone who is intentionally hiding things, there are a couple of ways that this could be represented that are more or less obvious to the reader. First, there would be deliberately incorrect or inconsistent details. So if your narrator is talking about something, an event in their past, and they say, well, that happened 5 years ago, and then later on they're saying or thinking, well, that happened 7 years ago, 10 years ago. Timeline markers like that might be off, and those are just little details that are wrong that a very perceptive reader is going to pick up on, and a very perceptive author is going to sprinkle throughout to just give hints about, well, maybe this isn't entirely truthful. If your narrator is deliberately lying to other characters, that might be a sign that they are also deliberately lying to the person who's reading, to the reader. If they have inconsistent interactions with others, maybe they are appearing very confident with one person and very shy and scared with another person, or if their consistency of how they speak, even some vernacular that they use in certain situations that they deliberately shy away from in other situations. These are all ideas of the narrator that can become unreliable, that can showcase to the reader that this narrator is hiding something and they don't want you to know it. So then you have to sprinkle in a bit more of tension and inconsistency in their narration of events. But what if your narrator isn't intentionally trying to deceive the reader, but instead it's just from their lack of understanding of the world around them, or they're trying to lie to themselves as well? So your evasive narrator is similarly going to be having inconsistent details. There's going to be something that stands out as they're not being honest about X, so you start to question everything else. So that's going to be the same with unintentional and intentional. There's going to be some small details of stories that are going to be changed. So if you have a character who wants to hide something about themselves, who wants something about themselves to not be true, so they are avoiding thinking about it, avoiding talking about it, then it might be something that's kind of strange, just dropped into somewhere. So if you never see a character existing in their home, but you hear a lot of stories about their home life, there might be something different that they're avoiding there. In the case of an unintentionally deceptive narrator, there might be a change in voice where you're thinking about thrillers or psychological stories where the narrator is sort of on a downward spiral. Not naming any examples, but there's lots of movies and books like that, where the narrator starts off appearing to be quite logical and approaching everything from that sort of story point, and then things sort of change and they're no longer presenting logically and things start to feel unreal, or even just their voice changing from logical to more angry and aggressive. That might be something that your narrator goes through over the course of the novel. And also in the unintentionally deceptive is our naive narrator, who will see something and present what they believe to be fact, but they're missing a lot of context, where they present something as fact and truth, but they don't have the context to explain why something happened or how something really occurred. So they go by their best guess, which may or may not be true. If you're not aware of what other people's reasons are, but the narrator presents as if they know the reason, I'm always hesitant to accept that as fact, because if they're presenting, well, this character did this, and they did this because they hate me. Do they really hate you? Do they have other reasons for that? Are you putting that emotion onto them because you're feeling self-conscious? Or are they doing this for other reasons? I think a lot of young adult relationships, if a young adult novel is told from first-person point of view, I'm always going to assume that it's an unreliable narrator, because teens, children, early 20s, they're going to have a limited perspective of the world. And especially as I'm getting older, I start to question, is that what you thought it was if this happened in a young adult novel? Is that really as bad as you thought it was? Is that targeting you, or is that just, it happened and you happened to be there and it has absolutely nothing to do with you, but you're the main character of your story, so everything has to do with you. And that's really where my experience of writing an unreliable narrator comes in, because I have my main character who is sort of, it's her against the world. She feels very much like she is a target of a lot of hatred, a lot of anger, because she was that in her previous experiences. And so she feels like that's what she is now. And that's really all that she can be, is the target of anger and hatred. And her perception of what other characters are doing, especially adult characters, it's not a reliable gauge of that person's emotional state or intentions. A lot of paranoia, a lot of assigning of reasons to things that maybe she has no way of actually knowing. And that's going to create the sensation of she's not really on the up and up. She's not 100% level with the reader, because she's not 100% level with herself, because she doesn't know the world as well as she thinks she does, but she presents everything as fact. To distill the unreliable narrator into a couple of key points in writing and or reading, look for the small details. Are they consistent throughout, or does something change? Look for the details that don't fit what is supposed to be there but isn't, and what isn't supposed to be there but for some reason it is. Does this character change how they're acting depending on the audience, and is that change significant? Because if they have a significant change of personality or perception, or they present themselves as being one way to character A and a different way to character B, why? Why is that happening, and how can we correct it if it's unintentional, or use it if it is intentional? If you're writing from first person point of view, your character's knowledge of the world is limited by their perceptions, and therefore there's going to be things that they don't know. So if they present something as fact that they have no way of knowing, doubt. You're inserting doubt. and I love it. I hope this little ditty about unreliable narrators is useful to somebody. I learned a lot when I was looking more into this because I'd always just thought of unreliable narrators as more the deceptive kind where they're intentionally misleading people. But there's a lot of great approaches to writing an unreliable narrator, and it makes the story more interesting when you're kind of doubting what the character is doing. I think it's more interesting anyway. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video, which will be out next week, and it'll be the 1st of May, so Camp NaNoWriMo will be over. Updates on that to come. We'll see what happens. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye. And always remember that if you're writing from first person...